All right, everybody, welcome to Wednesday night's Gem session. We have Scott Hanson, one of the developers, going to present on a mystery topic tonight. I guess he just broke the mystery. It's on Lua scripting, so I'll pass it over to Scott.
Well, since Daryl's been bothering me about Lua scripting, I decided to bust out a couple slides about it here. So I think I added this to the end of last year. So what in xLights, Lua scripting is the ability where you can call it. So Lua is a scripting language where it's intended to be embedded into software. So Lua scripting language is actually used in like Unreal Engine, which is a video games rendering engine. It's used in a lot of different C++ programs, and the intent of it is you don't have to recompile the software when you want to add like little additional features. So my idea when I added it was Keith added this ability to call APIs in xLights using a terminal app called xLDo. So instead of having to do that all the time, I wanted it where you could just run a script and it would do it all for you instead of having to run this separate app and use these command line stuff. So the basics of the Lua scripting engine is it can run these xLights automation commands. In theory, it's the users can create them and edit them in expandability, so you can kind of do stuff in xLights that you can't natively do. And it, in theory, makes repetitive tasks easier, at least basic repetitive tasks. So in Lua, I just wanted to go over a couple basic things. I don't expect you to all be Lua experts at the end of the night, and I still myself, there's some quirks of Lua that I don't like. But like most languages, it has your basic types. So you have Booleans, which is a true false value. You have strings, which are represented as a single quote or double quotes. You have numbers, which internally can either be like a 1, 2, 3 number, or it can be a fractional number or a decimal, so like a 0.4. Internally, it'll convert them to an int or a double, which is the data type you would normally see in most languages, but they just call it a number. They have tables, which we'll get into a little bit more because this is kind of powerful, but a table is kind of like a map or a list. So if you have like a list of properties you want to put in, and then you can also just have pointers to functions, which we won't really talk about too much. But tables, so kind of the tables are very powerful in my opinion. This is one of the things because Lua is kind of expandable and it's not very type. It has a very relaxed type system, which basically means types are kind of generic. They can be, you can make objects and assign them either a type of true, false string or, a function or something like that. So in xLights, all the APIs mostly use this table architecture because this is the easiest way to make it generic, make it where we can send different values and make it so the user can change them. So the first line here is how you define a table. So I just have a table. It's your curly brackets, and then you can set elements in the table. So if you just want the first element to be a Boolean, you put true. You can make it a string. You can make it an int. But you can also make elements in the table use, instead of just numeral indexing, you can also use indexing by like strings. So you can have a table with a value, and these two are actually equivalent. So you can have it X as a value, or you can just do X as basically like a parameter in there. And if you want to go down the rabbit hole, you can also have tables of tables. So you can have a table, which would be like a 2D map, but then an element in that table could then be another table. And some of the parsing in xLights to go between Lua and C++ kind of takes this to its advantage. So we can do things like embedded structures. But so that's kind of the basics of tables. And once we go over this, we'll show that most of the stuff that we end up doing is tables. So as part of the Lua scripting API, I had to kind of write an interface in xLights to wrap the Lua. So Lua itself, you could just run a Lua script in xLights, but it would be kind of pointless because there's no way for it to talk to xLights. So I wrote kind of these list of API commands. And I don't think I have them all on the slide here, but there's also a link. If you go to the website here, I made a README that has basically information from my presentation here. And there are some more additional commands that we probably won't go into for doing like JSON parsing and stuff. But if you see here, a lot of the return types are tables, and that's why I want to kind of talk about tables. Tables are like the way you can do a lot of things. So let's go back. So the most simple is run command, which this does the xLdo automation commands. There is a document on those commands as well. So these are the commands for xLdo that basically the Lua scripting wraps. So these are all the commands you can run. In here, they're documented as a REST API because that's what Keith wrote, was a REST API. So I basically just took the implementation that the REST API calls, and I call that with the Lua scripting. So these commands you can run the same. And if you look, this is kind of like a table. So when we look at the scripts, you'll see they're basically the tables of the parameters. And then we can command xLights to do these commands. Oh, I keep changing the wrong thing. So there's lots of them here. There's run command. And then there's some kind of, these are just custom commands I put in the Lua, and they all kind of have a purpose. So I know a big request is always, I want to do batch something. Like I want to do batch render. I want to do batch export. I want all my sequences to do, I want to do something with all my sequences. So I made a command that's, I say it's prompt for sequences. And this basically runs the batch render selector GUI. And it lets you select all of the sequence files in your show directory and then run whatever Lua action you write on it. Then there's some other ones here like show message. We'll just show a message box. There's a prompt for string. So you could do this if you want to put in a text entry or something. Prompt selection, which is very similar to prompt sequence. And then there's also a log capability. And when you're debugging Lua scripts, the log is really powerful because I don't really talk about it too much in here, but how I wrote the log is it actually accepts generic types. So you can pretty much put log parenthesis with anything and it'll print it out because it recursively will go through. If you have a table, go through all the elements and print them out. If you just put it a double, it'll print. So the logging has some capability in there. I don't really expect everyone to know this well because even when I write scripts, I end up having xLights' source code open a lot just to see how it's working. So I know this can be kind of tedious and it's rather advanced, I think, but you can do some capable things. So kind of the basic automations that I'll probably demo the most tonight. You can just open, save, close sequence. You can render. You can upload to controllers. So there are wrappers to doing like FTP connect upload or just straight up like controller config uploads. Exporting models and like video previews of your models. So if you want to export like your P10s to put on an FTP style device, you can do that. There's things to get the models and get controllers. Some of this stuff is building blocks for someday I'd like to be able to have it in maybe FTP connect, run scripts, and it could do certain things. Like I know the use case has been brought up about like Jackie has the lights. He has the snowflakes with the lights on the back and you want the brightness brighter on those. I think it'd be cool to write a script to kind of configure that for you. And simple things like if you want to like batch package sequence, things like that. And kind of what I've played with a little bit is there's also ability to add and copy effects. So if you kind of want to auto sequence a little bit, you can do that a little bit. You can do that with the API. So this is just a screenshot of the GUI that runs the scripts. So there'll be a list of scripts and then there'll be the log output. So this will have the results of the runner itself and from log statements. So if you put like a log in your script, they'll show up in this log. There's a clear button to clear this log, refresh if you add new scripts. You can just run the scripts. And then there's also a right click menu to view and open scripts as well. So we can edit them because there's no editor in here. So you still have to edit it with some third-party app. Like I use Notepad++. So that's kind of the basics. I know I probably went really fast, but I'm just going to kind of show some of the things we can do with it. So if you just go to Tools, Run Script, this will show you all the scripts. And in our documentation, it did say, mention this a little bit. So for the scripts to appear in the dialog, they have to be in one of two locations. So if you open this scripting dialog, you'll initially probably see 3 scripts in there. I have a lot more because these are ones I've written. But this dialog will go into where xLights is installed. And if one of the developers puts a script in the install directory in a certain folder, it'll show up in this dialog. Those will be some of the scripts in here. But then also, if you make a folder in your show folder, so I have one just called scripts, anything you put in here will also show up in your run scripts in the dialog here. So that's why if you make a new script or something, if you copy paste a script of some kind, and I do a refresh here, you'll see that that script now appears in the dialog. If you want to edit scripts, there's these right clicks I was kind of showing. On the current release, you won't have this open folder. I just added that today, so that's relatively new. But you can right click, view, and it'll use whatever your default Lua editor is. If you don't have one set because you are not a developer, it'll use the default text editor on your PC. So if you have whatever your default Lua or text editor are. So if you're going to do more advanced stuff like this, I personally would get a Notepad++. This is kind of like a more advanced Notepad. It actually does have a Lua runner in it. I don't use it, but you can use it for syntax highlighting and stuff, because if you don't know anything about Lua or about Notepad++, it supports syntax highlighting. You can select your language, or it'll auto find your language based on the file name, and it'll help you out a little bit here. So what can we do with this, and why do we waste our time with it? Most basic things is, I was kind of talking, there's this prompt for sequence. And what we can do is we can prompt. So when we run this script, it'll ask for a list of sequences. And it's a little screwy in Lua how it does for loops. I personally don't understand it well, but basically this makes a pair of, this is going to be a table as the return type. This takes the table, puts it into a pair of 2 things. So the first, there'll be like the elements of the table, and then this is the sequence ID of the table. Yeah, I basically have to Google it every time. So it's something. Another thing with Lua, unlike most script or most languages, it's a 1-based indexing. So normally when you have arrays in like C++ language, the first element in the array is a 0 index. In Lua, the first element in the array is a 1. So I'm not doing any really indexing in here, but if you ever wanted to reference something, you have to do 1 as the first, 2, so on. So kind of how I was talking before about tables are one of the most important things. So we have our curly brackets here. This is making a table. So we're making a table I call properties. And when we call this run command, so this will call the xldo command. So like we have open sequence here. And if we look at our table of commands in the xldo, you know, open sequence needs, so in here it's called load. It's actually the same. At some point, I think Keith or someone changed the name of it. But in the API, it actually accepts open or load right now. So you have to put the command in itself, the name of the sequence, and then there's, I don't know if this is optional prompt for issues. Do I have that in mind? No, I don't. But so instead of having to put this command in the table itself, it's just the first property in this run command. So if we go back to the Lua scripting, you'll see the run command takes two parameters. So it takes the command itself and then a table of properties or parameters. So sometimes commands don't need any properties or parameters. So if you see this, this is just basically an empty table. So when I run command, I put in the command I want to run, and then either if it doesn't need any properties, you just put an empty table, or if it needs properties or parameters, you pre-assign those. So this is a table where I set the sequence I want to open, and then the command here, it'll open it. I'm logging in the result. So the run command returns a table of results. If you look here, a table. And as we were kind of seeing tables to reference elements in the table, you can just use whatever the property is. So if you look in the XL do commands here, it'll have a response. So what the Lua wrapper layer is doing is it's taking this JSON response and turning it into a table. So if you see in my script here, when we load a sequence, there's a response value we could look at, which I don't have logged, but sequence here, that's one of the parameters. And so it makes a resulting table of element value, so on and so forth, based on this JSON. And then that's returned as a table, and we're looking at that sequence element in the table just to log what it opened. Same with package sequence, the result of the table we're logging, so we can kind of log whatever we want to do here. So there's a lot there for a script, but if you can either hit the run button or double click also runs it. So what it'll do is this is the prompt sequence dialog I was kind of talking about. We can just basically select a sequence, hit OK. And what xLights is doing here is it opened the sequence, it packaged it, and then it saved it. So it ran all three steps of our script there relatively instantly. And if we go back to our show folder, we should have a file now. So this is our color sequence that I selected packaged. So it's our show folder with our sequence and our other files all packaged into one. So it made the zip. So with the whole prompt here, if you wanted to package all the sequences, this is kind of just a test folder I have, so I don't have many sequences in here. But you could select all your sequences, do a batch, and run that. The other one that'll be in your install is the batch video export. And this will, this is a way basically to open sequences and do a video export. So in xLights, you can do that export house preview. Instead of having to go sequence and sequence and do that, this script will basically run that on all of the sequences you select with prompt. So those are the two that should be in there for sure. And then there's the render model export, which I have not been updating. So as Daryl pointed out, it currently, the one in xLights doesn't work at all. And then I tried to fix it the other night, and I guess it doesn't work with the low definition mode, which to help Daryl out, I was going to try to fix live here. See if
it works
we can
fine
get it
if it's in high definition. I've been using that.
So I didn't personally know about this command until like yesterday, but Keith added a command here. Are there any questions? I'm sure everyone is just dumbfounded and has no idea what I'm talking about, but
well, that package
export
sequence thing
models
could be great for backing up your sequences, because it creates all these zip files of the entire sequence, which is even more complete than what xLights does. So it's one way to
and
store all your sequences.
Yeah, and I do have this. Oh, I have this dream at some point. I don't know what this is gonna show, but so FPP Connect, I notoriously just blow out all my instances all the time. Like I just reimage them and I don't care. And I assume xLights can just upload everything. And that normally works out pretty okay for me, except when you blow out your master Pi and you lose all your schedules. So one thing I've always had this desire for is I wish I could have some way in xLights I could select my master Pi and download or back up all of the playlists, sequences, schedules on it. There's currently no way to do that, but I thought it'd be cool if there was some way I could run a script from this dialog and maybe it would back up all your FPPs, or like I was saying, if you have the custom LEDs that are on the ELF model where the backlight LEDs, it'll set up your FPP to have that kind of specialty thing. So maybe someday in the future I'll get that working. And in FPP6, I actually made like a zipping API in FPP to help me with this, with the intent of adding this feature someday. So, but let's go back to what Daryl says is broken here. So right now it's doing render. So previously, when you did a render export model, it'll run the command to get all the models from your layout, get the models, do the prompt selection dialog. So that's kind of the reason why some of these commands exist in here, is when I was using this, it's like, what do I need to make it easier to do stuff? And initially, everything wasn't returned as tables. It was returned as just strings. So there's some things in here to do string manipulation. But now that I rewrote everything to be table-based, to get the API to work, I really didn't know what I was doing. So I had to put in some requests with the guy who wrote the wrapper interface, and he helped me a little bit get some of this working. So now everything's returned as tables, and there's a little bit more abstraction, so it's a lot easier. But previously for this render export model, we were doing a render all, and then we were exporting this as a video. And so in Lua here, we have a table of the properties. And because it's Lua, we have some more advanced features. So this is the name of the model, which we're passing in as a property. But then also, I just wanted to use that as the file name. So 2 dots is concatenation, which is basically the ability to add 2 strings together in Lua. So this will take the name of the model. So if it's called star, and then it'll add .mp4 at the end of it. So now when it saves it, it'll make something called star.mp4. If you don't put a path, it'll use your current working directory, which is normally your show folder. And then I just have a logging in here of that because I wanted to make sure this works. So this is kind of with the logging, you can just log stuff all over the place to kind of see what's going on, to make sure your script is doing what you think your script is doing. But with this new command that Keith added, we shouldn't have to do a render and an export now. He added one that does both. So export model with render, and it has the high def property. I think the regular render should probably have that too. I didn't add it, but so what we can do here is now, instead of we don't need the render all command anymore, because in theory this does the rendering. So now we can just change that command to be with render, but we need to add that new property. So because I'm lazy and don't want to mistype, I'll just copy it straight from the document. And from what I can tell, it looks like it's a Boolean. It looks like it might be a string or a Boolean, so we'll take a guess here. But hopefully we can just put true. So true is a Boolean type value. Save this. And so right now I opened this random sequence. So I have a legal alien from Jackie here. So
I was using quotes, Scott, but I was having problems with it. So maybe you've got the fix that I was looking for.
Well, maybe we'll see here. So legal alien, I don't know if I have to go through it exactly, but yeah, this is the run command get models. So I got a list of my models, prompted me for which model to select, and that's what this dialog is. Now, if we hit OK, we get an error. So if you look here, it should tell you. So it runs the script in the background. And when you get an error like this, you'll see here, it says on line 14, we have an error. Well, that doesn't make much sense, but maybe it was just when that command was. So
It said it was expecting a string.
yeah, I see that, but let's see what happens. There you go. So you can kind of see the command, and I was talking about how I had logging. So I logged file name, and then this message, if you look at the APIs here, so message. So when it returns, it's returning a table of the response, which this is like this is your HTTP response, because this is kind of intended for an HTTP API. So they normally all have that response. So you could get like a 404 or a 500 normally, I think is the response we give. But if you look, we got a model export. That means it actually finished it. Sometimes I don't ever know what's going on here. So if you want to get really low level, you can look at the commands in xLights and it'll tell you the response is, so like 503, that's an error, where 200 is the good response. So message sequence created, no sequence open would be the error or something. So it's a little advanced to look through the source code and find them, but sometimes when I'm doing scripts, it's kind of something you have to do. It looks like batch render supports your high def command. So when we call that, it does. But you were saying the other one does not. But so one thing that I was.
So you just created a video, right? So if you were to go to your file explorer, you could find that video, right?
Yeah, I know. I wish there was a way I could just double click that path and it would open. I did that recently at a thing at work, so it might be. Yeah, so there's a video of my alien. It's going to be. So you're like, well, it looks like crap. Well, it's going to be the resolution of your model. So my model's only, what, 100 by 100 is at the default from Jackie. So we just take if you look at whatever this guy is, node layout. Well, if I was smart, I would have done it.
It was right at the top there. It did say 100 by 100 when you opened up the model data.
Yeah, 100 by 100. So that's the size of your video. It just takes the buffer size or and creates a video out of it. So was that not working when you tried changing that, Daryl?
If I had the low definition parameters set in the preferences, it doesn't work. Like you can leave that the way it is, just set low definition in the preferences. Sequences, maybe. There it is, low definition render. There. Now I had my low definition render set to 5. But you can try it even without changing it to see if you get an output now. Just rerun your export again.
Let's make sure we close this so we don't get any permissions thing.
So the idea here, guys, I could take my virtual matrix, crank up the settings. You know how we tell you to use 192 by 108 or something like that? You can crank up the value to 300 by 400 or whatever, run the Lua script, export them all to MP4s, and post those over to your Pi that has a virtual matrix on it. So you can automate that exporting of all the scripts.
So I don't know, maybe I'm crazy. It seemed to work.
Now change your low definition render to like 5. Did you do that on your prop now? Or something small?
Can you do that on a custom model? No.
I don't know.
Or is it only on matrices?
Maybe it's only on matrices. All right, do it there then. Do you have something coming on your matrix?
So,
but that's, yeah.
I wanted to show a little bit here. So I did you can also do effect editing a little bit. So I ran into this issue last year because I added props like, the 20th of December. You add my props, and of course I don't use groups very well. So how do you make effects show up right on your props? So I added some commands. Of course, when I did this, I didn't have these commands. I added them after the fact. But there's some basic commands where you can do clone effects. So basically it's just like the right click copy, right click clone. Like, well, what's the point of that? Well, you can do what I call all sequences. So if we look at this script, same prompt for sequences, we can now copy from everything to everything in all of our sequences. So since I'm lazy and I don't like to type, we can put source illegal alien, and let's put this on our matrix. If we go back, see if this actually works. It does. So basically what that script did was take what was on my legal alien, just copied it over to my matrix. So then we can do what Daryl wants. Is that 5 maybe? We can do a batch render and export map, right? Is that the one you like? Yes.
That looks right. Yeah. Let's see if that works.
So now, uh-oh, matrix spelled wrong and matrix spelled right. Matrix. So we got a 200 exported.
How big is the file? 1K.
1K. And now you're saying that's not
And-
right.
And you double click it. Can you even open it?
Well,
No.
that doesn't work.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's if you unset the
Yeah,
preference and do it again, it will work.
Yeah,
If you
so
unset the preference and do it again, it will work. I don't know. It's weird. Yeah. Right back in xLights, just unset it. I don't get it. I didn't look at the code though.
is true. I'm not running from the debugger, so it's hard to tell. Yeah, must be that's not working as desired. Well, I guess high def. Yeah, we can look at that. I don't want to. Yeah, some other minor things. If you know what ID3 is, before I added the feature to xLights, if you don't know, there's a feature now in the text effect, you can kind of do text replace. But as part of this idea that you can add effects, if you know anything about, so xLights settings under the hood are all string values. So when you have a string to say like your sub buffer and things like that, those are actually just raw string values. So you could write scripts, like if you always want to put this value on your tune2 sign and you're too lazy to use an effects preset, you'd rather do it this way, you could write scripts to do that the same way. And that's kind of what I have here. If I run this script, it put the layers on here. And now on my tune2, and it has no artist because of course I didn't open one with an artist or a title. So there's nothing. So these are the find, replace, and the text effect. If you put like title in there, it'll go into your metadata here, and whatever the title, your song name here, it'll put that as the title. So like if we were to, let's just do a new sequence.
So let's say I just purchased a tune2 sign from Mr. EFL and need to go to all my sequences and put that in. I could use a Lua script to add those effects in every sequence.
Yeah, so
Alright.
yeah, what you can do here is just run this. And previously, before I added the replace, I actually wrote a script to use the ID3 tag. It actually would go through the MP3 and find all the, I didn't write this, I found an example online, but it would actually pull out the artist and all that. And then if you looked in the first one here, it would pass it in and put that all in there. And after doing all this, This is kind of ripped off from KiCad. They have a feature where you can do text replace. There's probably other tools that have similar, but I added this replace instead of saving myself the pain and suffering. And the reason I did it too is I personally would, there is no way to cancel in here. This sets the data instantly. So if you accidentally delete this and hit done, like I notoriously accidentally will hit, X instead of C or something, and you basically delete the data and there's no way to cancel it. So that was my getting mad about that all the time. I was like, I'll make a better solution. So what this is doing is if you put title in here, it's taking the title from your metadata here and putting it on the screen. My second line here, is artist. So you see artist. If you look in, oh, I feel like a noob. I got the Zoom meeting bar in the way. If you go to manual.xlights.org, oh, if you read through all this at the very end now, there's a section I even put a little tag for it called text replace. It'll tell you, so if you put title or song, because people seem to like either, I put both in there. It'll put the song from here. You can put artist, album. If you want the raw file path for some reason, you can put that in there. Author. And these last couple aren't really taken from the MP3. They're just fields that you can populate. So if you wanted to always put, your website in there, if you're a sequence vendor or something like that, you can do that. I know there's a request lately. John Storms wanted the ability to populate these fields with a script. So if you're like writing, if you're making sequences all the time, you could just make a script and fill in your kind of personal sequence club information at the bottom. I thought that was a kind of interesting idea. So maybe in the future we will add that. But that is something.
On an aside, is there any way, maybe even Lua, to make uppercase of those values, or perhaps not, because we're putting in $artist, for example, on the screen there.
Yeah, so you want it so this is the uppercase?
Yeah. So right now you got bang with, mixed case. Would there be any?
It's going to just use whatever's wrong one.
Right. So there's not a way to trick it with Lua, huh? Okay.
Well, this right here is just in the effects render. Lua is just adding these effects.
Right.
But like if you wanted to be all up, like this is literally just for you, and this doesn't. You could just put the word bang in here.
Sure. That's what I'm going to end up doing, is making all of them uppercase. Okay.
And then, in theory, you just have to render again. But one thing I haven't really used this as much, but when you open a sequence, one of the parameters coming back actually was the length of the sequence. So this one, I got the table and I actually did the dot length instead of doing the square brackets. Either way the table works. But what you can do is get the length, and this will actually loop through for the length of the song every 1 second and add an effect that it is 1/4 of a second long. So if we run this command here, it actually put an on effect. So there wasn't much to this script here. So when we do this on effect command, the properties are your target, the effect you want, and then you can put palette or the settings in here as well. I think all of that's documented in the command. Get effects. It should be add effect. Add effect. So yeah, you need target, the effect type, your settings, strings or string, and then palette. Some of these are optional, like layer, if you don't put that in there, or time. If you don't put a start or end time, it just does beginning to end. So it'll do your whole sequence. Layer, it'll just default to the first layer if you don't put that in there. So like I don't have that stuff in there. But when I was adding the tune to, I do have layer. which this will put on the first layer, the second layer, third. And if you don't have 4 layers, it'll actually add the layers. So you don't have to worry about managing that. But you can see in the settings, it's putting the sub buffer in here. So this is like a smaller sub buffer and putting all the effects settings in there that you want. And if you need to get those settings, kind of the easiest way to get them is if you do a copy and just go into Notepad here and paste them. These are the settings. So minus the paste by cell. And I don't know what that, this is the time. I'm unsure what that stuff is, but this would be your palette settings or anything in there. Like we don't have anything enabled on our on effect. Like if we put on something and then we copy it now, you should see, yeah, the settings. So this first part is the settings. Second part is the palettes here if you wanted to dictate the palettes. So if you see this kind of matches, you have 8 palette boxes up here. So palette 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that would be the palettes you put in, that would be the settings. And the effect type. So you can kind of mimic putting effects on there. So yeah, I hope to flesh this out a little bit more. There is a command to just like add controllers. So if you wanted to add, I don't know, 20 controllers, like here, I put the model vendor. You can put this on here, run it, and it'll add 20 controllers. Is that useful for most people? Probably not. But the reason that command is actually in there is if you run xScanner, there's actually an option to add a controller from xScanner into xLights. The thing when you're using the API between apps, you have to enable it. So this is kind of the thing. If you watch Keith's video, you have to have this xFade/xSchedule port set to something, either A or B, preferably A for this. But then if you have xScanner, in theory, live demo here, so we'll see if this doesn't work. But you can import to xLights and it'll add it to xLights. So if you, that was always when I first started using xScanner, I was kind of like, I want a way that I can get, I find it in here. It's kind of lame that I have to go and type it in here. So if you have that enabled, you're able to just right click on one, import it to xLights. It should add it. If it shows up correctly in here, it should also set the type, like that one kind of worked. If it'll add any device you put in here. So it'll, even if this isn't a controller, it'll add it. And I thought it will try to find if it's like a WLED or something, it should change those as well. But mileage may vary there on that right click option. But yeah, you can also use that command to just add a bunch of controllers if you want. Yeah, things I'd like to add is, I have it on my to-do list and I tried to get it to work once, is a way to like update your display elements. I know that's a huge pain in the butt. Like when I added a new element last year, there's no way right now to go sequence to sequence and update your display elements. That's something I'd really like to add. Another thing I think it would be cool if you could edit models as well. There's not really any commands. Like there's a command right now to get your models, but it'd be kind of interesting, I think, if there's a way you could edit model settings through commands. So if someone accidentally draws their whole house backwards, maybe we could write a script that'll spin it around or something. But that's kind of the more advanced stuff that I hope someday.
Is there a way to do it with groups? What I'm finding is that as I'm working on a sequence, I go, oh, I need this type of group, go in and create it. And then isn't it only assigned to that sequence? Or will it be available on all sequences and then I have to go in and add it to that specific sequence lineup?
Yeah, when you add a new model or group, it's not by default in the display elements, the master view of the sequence. You have to go in and manually add it. Yeah, there's no
So
way of there's no way of currently doing that. That's something I'd like to add. That's what I was just kind of talking about. Is a
yeah,
way
so
to.
so a Lua script would do that?
No, currently there's no way to do that with Lua. No,
Okay. Okay.
that's something I tried to write. I couldn't get it working. But yes, that's something I've run into quite a bit as well. I know Daryl says I like to put secret features in. So this is kind of from most of these slides are from when I went to Florida. So if you ever want to see this live, I did this in Florida. I didn't add this, but there's bulk edit, as most people probably know. And from bulk edit, there's this select effects dialog, which unfortunately I wrote twice now, at least. Rewrote it once because the first one was kind of terrible. But if you go to view, Windows, select effects, there's a dialog here where the concept behind it is a way that you can find all of effects of a certain type and then do bulk editing in it. So if it'll list all of the types of effects that are in your sequence when you do the drop down. So if you wanted to select all your on effects, and it's kind of a top down approach. So it'll do all the on. If you do on, it'll show all the models that have an on. If you had multiple models, you could hit select all, it'll select them all. There's a way to pair the timing. So if you only want to get all of the on effects in a certain area, so if you're looking for all the video effects in the last minute of your song, you can change this a little bit. There's a way to pair by color. This little, I don't know how to describe this. This is kind of the sensitivity slider. So like if you said blue, it'd find all the blues, but maybe you didn't get the exact blue you have in your sequence because it's really hard to kind of just guess these values. So there's a sensitivity here where you can, if you want all the lightish blues, you could try to hit the median, and then you could select all here, and you could use the bulk edit property that I quickly showed in that slide. Or now if the new thing that Keith added, this is not mine, so don't give me credit, but there's a way to bulk edit colors somewhere in here. Oh no, it's an edit, color replace. So you could do selected only. Since these are selected, I could now say green. And in theory, it'll replace all of them I selected here that were blue and make them green now. So there's a kind of a way you can use these in tandem together now a little bit to do a little bit better bulk color editing if you want. Something I added right before Florida as well that I didn't even do a video on it yet or anything. There's also the ability, where is it? Under views here, Windows. So under select effect, there's also search effect. So what is search effect? It's what I wanted select effect to be. This has the ability, so I kind of talked about how all effects are strings under the hood, all your settings. This select or search effect, say it 10 times fast. This gives you the ability to search for specific strings. So if you wanted to say, I want to find all the times that my subbuffer is that value in all my models, that's with the little dash dash all, you can hit find. And it did work for a second. I guess I jinxed it. Well, that's a bummer. Oh. There you go, Daryl. Go file that one.
I don't even know.
Oh, I added a 0. That was the issue. Okay. too click happy, I guess. But you can basically find settings. So let's say you have a sequence like this or something. Sure, let's just, oh no, let's not do that. Oh well. Just break everything. Lots of errors. You could do something like, I want to find all the videos. And this is all the settings of the video. Or if you want to find everything that has this Dropbox link, you could find all these Dropbox links. And then like anything else, you can do a bulk edit on them. So if you see these are actually all selected in your timeline, then you can bulk edit them. So that's kind of a way that I wanted, a way that I could easily find things, settings. Historically, I would go into the XML file and just manually edit these, which I still do at some point. But as you can see here, these are the settings. So this is like, you see picker control video, that's the video's raw setting. So kind of have to know a little bit of understanding of under the hood, how this works a little bit to have some usefulness out of it. But yeah, that's kind of the basics.
If that's the basics, I want to see the advanced.
Well, maybe that's the advanced. Yeah, I was hoping to have it working for today, but of course it didn't work. And I was working on it at work, so I don't really want to remote into my work PC, but I mean, I wasn't working on it at work. But I know everyone, Lua is kind of a cryptic language a little bit, or like I personally know Lua enough because I use it at work. But recently I've been attempting, and it's not currently in the builds or anything, but I was hoping I could get it to run. Please hold here. Recently, I've been attempting to make this also work with Python. So what, Python's the #2 language in the world these days. If you look up most popular programming languages.
What's #1 now? I'm curious.
It's probably Java or JavaScript. It's probably
Oh,
JavaScript.
yeah, okay.
JavaScript, which is used on websites. That's
Oh,
normally
it's TypeScript.
Well, TypeScript is just a ripoff of JavaScript. So.
True.
But even a lot of schools now, like my college, they're going to switch to teaching Python, which some people are anti. Or if you use KiCad or some other tools, they have embedded Python interpreters in them. Hopefully I'm not showing too much private information here. If so, blur it out, Daryl. One time I think I showed a password in a video. This might take too long to compile. Is there any questions, comments, anyone want lost it beyond their mind? They want me to go over something a little bit more in depth? I see there's like 14 chats. I don't have it open to look at it.
There's no chats here. We're good.
So on the spec stuff, does it have the ability to insert a layer above something that already exists? Basically create a layer 1 where there wasn't one previously without modifying the stuff below it?
So if you put layer 1, it would add a layer 1. Or if you already had like 4 layers and you put layer 1, it would just add it to layer 1. But it would probably, I don't know if it blows out or just skips what's already there. It might just overlap it and you get a real mess. But I see what you're saying. I don't think right now there's a way to like push down the current effect.
Yeah, my use case is I've sequenced the bats a way I don't necessarily care for. So I would like to insert a new state layer above everything so that I can, have them flapping during the entire sequence or all the sequences, right?
Yeah.
I just have to modify my group, but if I create the state, then it would just work.
This did not work.
Also, if you ever get that Python stuff working, let me know. I've already got a scriptlet that'll generate the channel outputs the pixel overlays.json for FPP for the brightnesses.
Yeah, well, in theory, with the Lua runner, you could actually have the Lua runner run a Python runner and do what you want to do, kind of.
Cool.
But I don't want to flare around too much here. I have oh, I didn't knit this. This is a cool feature.
So I guess the goal here is not to have everybody be an expert in creating these Lua scripts, but as it matures a little bit, we come up with a library of these scripts that everybody will have access to.
Yeah, and I know it's been discussed before. It would be cool to have. So right now it's, if you have when you install xLights here, xLights, sure. This is the scripts folder I was kind of talking about, and these are the default ones I put in there that do just some basic operations. So if there was new scripts, this can be put in the installer, and then these are added every time there's a new version. So these are put here by the xLights installer. I know it's been discussed and it'd be interesting, cool idea. I'm not anti it, but a way where you could download scripts in here. So if you had some kind of repository of scripts that this could go through and select them, and it could be like the model download or something similar. At this point, it's very niche or whatever, so I don't see that as a thing right now too much, but it would be cool. This is not seeming to want to work. Not finding my Python directory. Yeah, so without some debugging, that's not going to work. Yeah. It's more than your half hour there, Daryl. So
yeah, well, we're coming up on an hour. Is there any last minute questions before we end it off for our recording? I take that as a no. I thank you, Scott, for an impromptu session. And so it's getting its way. It's making progress. Still much more can come, but I think the bones are in there, so that's kind of cool. And as the more our show grows, the more things we probably want to make use of this tool for. So thank you for that.
You put a hand up.
Go ahead. Do we have a hand for Scott, Chris, or is that just a general xLights question, Chris?
General xLights question, so I'll wait.
Okay, just wait, hold on a second. All right, thank you very much, Scott. I'm going to stop the recording now.